Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted more financial freedom, then do we have the Values Factor show for you. Today I'll be talking with The Secret's Dr. John Demartini, the best-selling author of over 40 books, including The Values Factor. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about the secret to finding financial freedom and creating an inspired and fulfilling life. That, plus we'll talk about Paul Bragg and Ed Tellison, big wave surfing, saving $1 an hour, Bruce Willis and Michael Jackson, as neighbors that is, what on earth are the 10 heirs, and what in the world Mrs. McLaughlin and a reading circle has to do with anything. Gotcha. So welcome to the show, John. Are you ready to shine?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Woohoo!
Love the intro.
So before we dive right into things, are you still living on a ship called the World?
I am. When I'm there, I travel extensively speaking and go flying and hoteling, but my home and residence for going on 18 years has been the World, which is a magnificent location. I love it. It's the best address on the planet.
Now, as far as I understand, it's where more billionaires may live than anywhere else on the planet.
I think per capita, for sure.
Yes.
There's only 100 of us that actually live on the ship, and we have about 295 staff. And it's in Spain right now. It's in the Mediterranean. And I happen to be in Johannesburg at the present. So it is moving around the world, and I get off and on as I travel. But it is definitely a very lovely. It's some amazing people that live on there that do amazing things, that have been fortunate in life. And I've been very blessed to be one of those people there.
Very cool. So let's go. We're going to dive back to the ship in a little bit. And I'm fascinated because you've apparently lived in places like Antarctica, which almost nobody else can say. Isn't that correct?
Well, the ship goes all over the world.
Yeah. And
so from the Arctic to the Antarctic to everywhere where water will allow the ship to go, because it's a large ship. And it's a condominium ship. So it's the world of residences at sea. So it's my residence. But yes, I've been to Antarctica twice and to different parts of Antarctica. And it's if anybody has the opportunity to get to Antarctica, I promise you it's worth the experience. And on that ship's the best way to go, but on any way going, it's worth it.
I love it. So let's talk about fortune, and let's talk about misfortune in disguise, because Mrs. McLaughlin wouldn't have guessed at age 7 when she was talking to your parents that you'd end up living on the ship, would she?
No, I had learning problems as a child, and my first grade teacher asked my parents to come to school because when it was coming to reading, I just couldn't do it. I started out in normal reading, went to remedial reading, and then had to wear a dunce cap. In those days, they literally made you face the window and wear a dunce cap, which is a little bit odd today. And my parents came to the school, and the teacher sat with them and said, "I'm afraid your son's got learning problems. I don't believe he'll ever be able to read. I don't think he'll be able to write because I wrote backwards and I couldn't speak properly. And I don't think he'll ever go very far, amount to anything, or achieve much in life. If I were you, I'd put him into sports." Because I loved running, because when I was born, I had my arm and leg turned in, and I had to wear braces on my arm and leg until I was 4. And when I got out of them, I just wanted to run. And I ran and ran and ran and ran. And she noticed that I was excelling at running, but not speaking, because I just couldn't speak well and I couldn't read.
So in my case, they sent me to a remedial class at one point, and they actually, for handwriting, would take me out of class and put me in the center of the whole school so everybody could see that I didn't know how to write.
Exactly. That's the dunce cap kind of thinking that they had at the time.
Yes.
And they thought that would be a discipline thing to get you back to do it. That's how they thought, but it just didn't work. I just couldn't do it.
So the interesting thing is I want to talk a bunch about billionaires here today. And one of the values that you talk about with billionaires is that when they face adversity, when they're told they can't do something, they will find a way up, over, through, around, or under, which eventually you did. But before that, what was life like growing up until about 13, and what'd you do then?
Well, all the way through elementary school, the way I figured out how to pass school was to get with friends that were the smart kids. Mm-hmm. And so I would kind of suck up to them and befriend them and ask them, what did they learn? And I'd make them feel like they were smart by asking questions. And they would tell me enough information to allow me to at least pass. And that worked until I was 12. And then my parents moved from Houston, Texas, where I was living, to Richmond, Texas, which is a small little town, a lower socioeconomic area in the country. And there wasn't any smart kids that could help me. And I ended up failing and I dropped out of school. So I left school. I left home at 13 and I kind of left school and dropped out of school. I tried to go to another place temporarily, but it didn't work. And so I became a street kid and I lived in a bowling alley for a while, the back of a bowling alley, 24-hour bowling alley. I lived in a park. I lived in cars. I lived in the back of buildings. I lived at friends' houses. I was a street kid till I was 18.
What made you, other than, I mean, school is massive, but may I ask, what was going on at home that you said, I'm out of here?
It actually was nothing at home. That my parents were amazing. They were lovely. They gave me a lot of freedom. It's a funny story. I don't know if it's something you want me on the show to say, but I was playing in the barn with my dad on a pool table.
Yeah.
And we were playing, and I said, Dad, I need to go and get cleaned up. I'm going into town. I'm going to hitchhike into town. We live 13 miles away from anything.
Yeah.
And my dad said, well, no, you need to stay home tonight. You've been out most of this week. Well, he didn't know that I had a buddy over, a buddy that had his parents go out of town, and we had the house, and we invited two girls to come. And frankly, I didn't want to look stupid by not showing up. And so I told my dad, I said, no, I really want to go to town. And he says, no, you stay home tonight. No, I'm going to go to town. But I didn't want to tell him I got a girl at a place that has no parents. So I said, no, I'm going to town. He said, well, if you go to town tonight, you don't come back. And I went, oh, crap. I said, okay. And that's the way it is. Because I wasn't going to pass up that deal because this is the hottest chick that I knew of. And I wasn't going to pass up the opportunity and look foolish on that. So I took the risk. I just packed my bag and took off. He didn't really want me to leave.
Yeah.
I have lovely parents. There was no issue there, except he was trying to make me disciplined and stay home. And I didn't. And so I took him for his word, and I started to live away from home and survived and became a street kid because I wasn't doing well in school, and I became street smart. And I'm very grateful that I did. And my dad trained me when I was young because I had learning problems, how to be a little entrepreneur. In fact, when I was 9, I went to my dad. I said, Dad, I want to make some money. I want to buy a baseball and a glove and a bat. And he says, okay, have you mowed the yard? Yes. Have you edged the sidewalk? Yes, sir. You cleaned the gutters? Yes. Have you cleaned out the garage? Yes. Have you swept the sidewalk? Yes. Have you trimmed the hedges? Yes. You pulled the weeds? Have you shined my suit? Yes, 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 yes. Well, son, I don't have anything else you need to do, so I can't just give you money without doing a service. That's how the world works. If you want to make money, you have to go to the neighbors. So I went to the neighbors and I talked to the lady into let me do everything in her yard, mowing, edging, trimming, everything, hedge clipping. And I made like $25, 1963, which is a major project in this yard. So my dad saw me the next few days with a bat, a glove, and a ball that I bought with my money. And I was really inspired by it because I made some money and I worked hard. And my dad said, where'd you get the money? And I said, well, I did all the work. He said, what equipment did you use? I said, the stuff in the garage. He said, son, you can't just use equipment without, paying for that. Well, how much? And he said, well, what did you do with it? And he came up with a calculation. And so $7.50 I had to pay him. And I felt kind of bad because I said, well, Dad, I spent the money already. He said, well, it'll teach you. You got to pay your dues. You can't just use equipment and not pay for it. So I had to pay for gas and everything else. And that kind of hurt because then I had to do like 3 or 4 more jobs to make money and pay him back and pay for that new stuff. But I was getting a little bit discouraged because I was now working harder and making less, kind of like human beings do. And one day a guy was walking by as I was doing a yard in the hot summer. And he said, I said to him, I said, would you like to make some money? He said, sure. I'll pay you 50 cents if you push this mower around. And 50 cents was decent in those days. And he said, cool. And so I got this kid doing it and another kid. And I got 3 groups of 3 kids building a landscaping business. And I got the Mallows and the Zubrods equipment. And they talked to my dad and did the same deal. And so I had 3 kids, three groups of kids, 9 kids doing yards. I was making the deals. They were doing the work. I was cleaning up. And I ended up with, after everybody's paid, my dad, gasoline, everything, kids, everything, I netted $45 in an average day, which would be like about $800 today for a kid 9 years old. And so my dad was like thinking, that's cool. But son, you forgot something. You're not saving any of your money. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're spending it. And if you do, you're going to be working your life for money all your life. You got to save it and make it work for you. Well, what do I do? So what he did is he went out and bought a coin collection set and a piggy bank, a big one. And I started putting coins in there instead of just spending it. And it was kind of fun because I was collecting old coins, buffalo nickels and stuff from the 1900s and stuff in there. And in the process of doing it, I put this piggy bank and I filled this thing up. And my dad never gave me the combination or a key to open this thing. So in my 52nd floor of my office in Houston, Texas, there's a credenza there that has the original piggy bank from 1963 with the original coins that have never been opened. And I've kind of seen it as a metaphor for making sure I think long term. And after I started saving money, he says, I'm proud of you, son. You're working, you're making money. I now want you to buy your freedom. I said, what's that mean? Because every time he talks to me, it's costing me money. Yeah. I said, what do you mean buy your freedom? He says, I want you now to know what it's like to be free. So I'm going to start charging you $7.50 a week for clothing, food, and rent. But with that, you're going to be able to go on your bicycle that you just now bought, go anywhere you want to go, do anything you want to do, as long as you're home at 9 o'clock at night. You can leave it early in the morning as you want, but as long as you're home at 9 o'clock at night. And I went, cool. So I started paying $7.50 a week, which meant basically a dollar a day or so, $1.50 a day, to go and have the freedom. And my dad let me do it. And I drove my bicycle 35 miles in different directions. I went I learned everything within about a 30, 40 mile radius of that entire city. And that taught me a lot. That was great. My dad was trying to make me an entrepreneur. So when I hit the streets, I always knew I could rely on those kind of activities to survive. And I was a street kid, and I learned how to be, street savvy. I mean, I did things on the street and panhandled and did odd jobs and all kind of stuff. And I'm very grateful for that. My dad, giving me that insight.
It's fascinating. There's another guest we had on recently, and he worked for the mafia as a pool boy at age 13 and ended up employing dozens of people beneath him to run a pool business, a legit business, but for the mafia. But he learned about savings. He learned about working with other people. He learned about who you hang with is so incredibly important. These are valuable lessons as a child. You made your way from the streets, being an entrepreneur from the streets to Hawaii, to the big surf, to the big waves, and then you almost died. What happened?
Well, when I was 14, I hitchhiked to California. And I took a surfboard and I hitchhiked from Texas to California. On the way there, I met an amazing guy in El Paso called Howard Hughes. He was doing an El Paso natural gas deal there. And he saw me on the streets and he came up to me and tried to help me. And he took me to the downtown El Paso library and he told me two things. Never judge a book by its cover because the cover will fool you. Yeah. And he said, you probably think I'm some old guy in the street, but I'm one of the wealthiest men in the world. And I thought he was just an average guy. I had no idea who he was. And then he says, he took the two books off the shelf and he put my hands on them. He says, you learn how to read, boy. He had Aristotle and Plato on the table. He says, you learn how to read because there's only two things they can never take away from your life, and that's love and wisdom. So you gain the wisdom of love and the love of wisdom. Then he geared me and directed me out on the streets back off so I could hitchhike to California. Then I met Timothy Leary 2 days later, or a day and a half later. I met Timothy Leary at his place in Idlewild hitchhiking. So I had a very amazing adventure meeting amazing people. I made it to California. I lived in Huntington Beach. I stayed behind the Golden Bear, which is a club there, in the back on a pallet. And B.B. King and all these singers and stuff were there. And they come out there and have a smoke or whatever. And I'd eat pretzels with them out in the back and meet all these amazing people. And then I hitchhiked down to Mexico so I could go surfing, and then got into Mexico illegally and got out legally. Those days, Trump didn't have a wall. And then I eventually panhandled enough money in Huntington Beach to be able to fly to Hawaii. And there I started in the Kamehameha Highway Sunset Bridge. I slept underneath that. Then I moved to Iaka Beach Park, slept under the park bench, then slept in the bathrooms when it rained. And then I found an abandoned car to live in. And eventually I climbed socially to a tent in a grass house. And I was a surf cat. I mean, I surfed every day. I surfed with people like Jerry Lopez and as a little boy, Laird Hamilton. He was like a 7, 8-year-old kid then. Yeah. And I met some of the top surfers in the world. And I lived right at Ika Beach Park and surfed with some of the big waves. And I got to ride giant waves. I got to surf 40-foot waves by the time, in a few years. And I lived there. And then I was not taking care of my health. And I nearly died of strychnine and cyanide poisoning from something I was eating, because I was eating kind of off the land. And I nearly died. And luckily, a lady found me in my tent, because I was unconscious for 3 days. She found my tent, helped me recover, took me to a health food store. And leaving health food store one day, I saw this flyer on a door that said, special speaker Paul C. Bragg, Sunset Recreation Hall, Hawaii, Maya Bay. And I thought, something says calls me to go there. I never went to classes. School was not my thing. So I went to this class, and that one gentleman there who spoke, Paul Bragg, in 1 hour, one message, one night, inspired me to believe that I could overcome my learning problems. I could someday learn how to read. I could be intelligent, and that I could become a teacher. The things that I never thought I could do, but deep inside, I kind of wanted to do it. And that night I saw a vision of what I wanted to do, and a vision of speaking in front of a large audience, and it was real to me. And that was a turning point in my life. I was 17, just about 18 years old, and that night changed the trajectory of my life. And today I'm doing what that man inspired me to do, or what I got inspired listening to that man that night. And so I'm very grateful for meeting him. I know his daughter now, and his daughter, Patricia, had been a friend for many, many years. And I'm very thankful for meeting that man. That one man and one night really did make a difference in my life.
What is the one first step you took from then, after listening to Paul, that kind of shifted everything?
Well, that night at the end, he said, those of you that would like to continue to learn from me and study, you can come to the Waikiki Beach at Fort DeRussy, and every morning he has a class. So the next morning I hitchhiked in at 5:45 in the morning to come be with him. And I just learned from him every day for 3 weeks. And then he said he was going back to Santa Barbara, and I wasn't going to see him again. I never did see him again. And then right before he was about to leave, I was the last person there at this little class he was doing. And I told him that you said that what have we decided that night on the Sunset Recreation Hall, that would become my destiny, to be a teacher. And he said, yes, that's true, son. And I said, well, I don't know how I can do it. I don't know how to read, and I got speech impediment. And he said, well, that's not a problem. I want you to say to yourself every single day for the rest of your life, and never miss a day, that I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom. He made me say it over and over again, and I started saying it. I've never missed a day in 46 and a half years saying that every single day to myself. I didn't know what it meant, but I just never stopped. And I started to do what he said. I started meditating. I started eating different. I went and picked up my first book, Chico's Organic Gardening and Natural Living, and tried to read it. I started fasting. I started doing everything he told me to do. I started visualizing. I started to talk to myself differently. I started to prioritize who I was hanging out with and the surfers I was hanging out with instead of the drug scene. And within a few weeks, a few months actually, I did a meditation, and it said it's time to go back to see my parents. So I flew back to Los Angeles, hitchhiked back to Texas. Mm-hmm. My parents, when I got home, they said, what brought you home? And I said, I had this vision to come home. They suggested I take a GED, a high school equivalency test. Yeah. I passed the test by guessing. I mean, I guessed. I just closed my eyes. I went, I'm a genius and I apply wisdom. I just filled in a little pencil dot, and somehow I guessed. My parents were so grateful that I have a high school degree now, because I never finished high school. Mm-hmm. Then they said, why don't you take a college class, an entrance exam? You never know, you might go to college. And so I said, what do I do? He said, same thing as the other test. One was a 1 day, now it's a 3-day test. Yeah. And I closed my eyes and I guessed through that thing and friggin' passed that test. And now I can go to college. My parents said, the surf doesn't come back up until October. Why don't you consider taking classes? So I went to some summer school classes, and the first class I took is English and history. And at the first test in the summer school was 2 weeks later. And I got the results the next day on the back outside the door. And I got a 27, not a 72. And you had to have 72 to pass. Yeah. And I failed miserably. I was so embarrassed. I ran to my car and I cried in my car. I drove home crying. I curled up in a fetal position in the living room of my bedroom. I mean, my parents' living room under this little Bible stand. And my mom came home from shopping and she saw me distraught. She said, what happened, son? I said, I blew it. And I started apologizing to her because I felt I'd let her down. I said, I guess I don't have what it takes. I guess I'll never be able to read or write or communicate or amount thing, never go very far in life. I guess I'm just a failure. And I was really crying. And my mom said something that turned my life. She put her hand on my shoulder and she said, son, whether you become a great teacher, a healer and philosopher, like you dream, whether you return to Hawaii and ride giant waves like you've done, or you turn to the streets and panhandle as a bum like you've also done, I just want to let you know that your father and I are going to love you no matter what you decide to do. And she said that. My hand went into a fist. I looked up. I saw myself standing in front of a large audience. And it was real again. And I said to myself, I'm going to master this thing called reading, teaching, and studying. I'm going to master this thing called philosophy and healing. And I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to travel whatever distance. I'm going to pay whatever price to give my service of love across this planet. I'm not going to let any human being on the face of the earth stop me, not even myself. And I went up and I hugged my mom. I went into my room. I got a dictionary out. And I made a commitment to memorizing 30 words a day. With the help of my mom, she tested me on 30 words a day. And I did that day after day after day after day until my vocabulary was strong enough to pass the test. I went back and I started excelling in school. And my vocabulary grew 30 words a day times 365 days for 2 years. It gets some pretty good vocabulary growing. And I started excelling and became one of the smartest kids in the classes because I was determined like no one else in the classes were. They were taking life for granted and taking school for granted as teenagers. Man, I was on fire. And all I wanted to do is read. And I started reading as much as I could, encyclopedias, books. I stayed in the library there. I did everything. And then about a year after that, right before I turned 19, my mom asked me, son, what do you want for your birthday? Christmas. I was born on Thanksgiving Day. And I said, Mom, I want the greatest teachings on the face of the earth, the greatest writings humanity's ever created by the greatest minds who ever lived. Yeah. And she said, you sure you don't want a T-shirt? And I said, no, ma'am. So let me see what I can do. So she contacted her brother, who was a professor at MIT, my uncle, and he sent 2 giant 6 by 6 by 6 foot wooden crates on a flatbed truck to our house. And I went out with a crowbar, and they put them on the ground. I opened up with a crowbar, and I brought thousands of books into my room. I mean, it was thousands of books. Filled my room with this book, and I just sat there on this little yoga mat and just read. And I just read and read and read and read 18 to 20 hours a day if I wasn't going and driving to school. And my vocabulary grew and my knowledge grew. And all of a sudden, a kid came up to me and asked me to teach him yoga. And another one asked me to teach him meditation. Then 16 kids asked me to teach him algebra as I was learning. And then more and more kids started asking me stuff, and I started teaching. And by the time I was 20 and I was at the University of Houston, I'd have 100 to 150 students, sometimes swelling up to 400 students every day under the trees with a Q&A. And then if it rained, we were in the cafeteria. And when I went on to professional school, I started teaching 6, 7 nights a week, pretty well every day. Whatever I was reading in the morning, I would get up early in the morning at 2 o'clock. And by then I was now on fire with reading. I was reading speed reading. I was learning. I had mastered my speaking, and I still had some awkward words, but slowly but surely they were getting mastered. And I was just determined to master speaking, teaching, healing, and philosophy and reading. And, you know, it started growing. It started growing from that to the community, the city, the state, the nation, the world. Now I've been in 150 countries. I've done one of my programs in 64 countries. And I've been blessed to reach, you know, billions of people now with radio, television, newspapers, magazines, movies, 40 movies. I mean, amazing stuff has happened. So if you never give up on a dream and you give yourself permission to go after what you want and you prioritize your actions every day and you're willing to do whatever it takes to go after it, it would be impossible to convince me you can't do something that you would dream about in life, something that other people think is pretty cool. And all I know is that I never gave up on my dream, and I'm very grateful, and I get to do it every day. I'm here in Johannesburg, and tomorrow I've got media, and I've got to talk, and I got a meeting the next day, and I talk, and then after that I leave at 2 in the morning to go to France, and I speak, and then I go to London the next day to speak, and I go to Los Angeles the next day to speak. Because I was told I would never be able to do it, being able to do it is extremely meaningful to me today.
Woohoo! Oh my God. Thank you so much, John. Let's go from there. Today I want to talk about money with people. And I want to talk first about what billionaires know about spending money that the rest of us, or that the poor people don't. And to segue into it, recently, I guess, 6 months ago, we bought a shiny, bright yellow Tesla. The first car I've owned in over 10 years, which we've used for recording, we've used for the show, has helped bring in countless dollars for our income. But I wasn't doing it just for I want the shiny toy. In fact, I waited over 10 years to get a car, any car. What can you tell us about appreciables and depreciables and what the rich know that the rest of us don't?
Well, every human being lives by a set of priorities, a set of values, things that are most important, least important in our life.
Yeah.
And this set of values dictates their destiny. And whatever that set of values are, it discerns what you perceive, what you decide, and what you act on in life. Mm-hmm. And so whatever's highest on your value, you spontaneously are inspired to do. You just do them without effort, without needing to be motivated. Lower things on your values you need motivation for. If you don't have a value on wealth building, you're going to put your money into things you value more. And what happens is the money circulates through the economy from those who value it least to those who value it most.
Can you repeat that slowly for people? That one statement makes this whole show today.
Okay, well, money circulates through the economy from those who value it least to those who value it most. Let me give you an example.
Please.
So let's say you have a value on your children, not on wealth building. The second you get money, your money goes to the kids, their education, clothes, everything else.
Yep.
But let's say you buy stuff from the clothes store, and the lady at the clothes store doesn't have a value on kids, but she has a value on education, seminars. So she immediately gets her money and puts it in seminars. And so she blows her money, and at the end of the month, she's out of money because she spent it on seminars. The person at seminar, let's say, has a value on travel. And so they put it into money into travel. That's their highest values. And the people that own the travel service, they like to, buy land and buy properties. And so all of a sudden, they now buy things that are appreciable, that are assets that go up. So the money circulates through the economy until eventually goes to somebody that actually wants to buy something that goes up in value instead of buying consumables that depreciate and go down in value.
Yeah.
As long as you buy things that are going down in value instead of buying things that go up in value, you'll be working your life for money instead of having money work for you. You'll be a slave to money instead of its master. So that's why it circulates through and eventually goes in the hands of the people that really have a value on asset building, so they accumulate wealth. And the difference between the poor and the rich is three basic things. The rich have a desire to serve people, so they have a source of income.
Yeah.
They have a desire to buy assets, not liabilities and depreciables and consumables, because people that buy consumables are living vicariously in other people's brands instead of building a brand.
Yeah.
And they have transcended the morality of money. Many people get in the idea that money is good or bad, and as long as they do, it controls them. Money is neither good nor evil. It's just a vehicle of expressing the services you provide to people. And they basically go out and they serve vast numbers of people, and they save and invest vast assets. And if a person doesn't build assets and doesn't want to buy assets, where's their money going to come passively? There's not going to be financial independence if they don't have that. So when I learned that, I changed my trajectory of my life, and I moved towards financial independence. I'm financially independent, live an incredible life today because I learned to buy assets, not liabilities. And most people don't know the difference. One puts money in your pocket, one takes it out of your pocket.
So if you buy something that's depreciable, but it's putting money into your pocket, then it is working for you. It becomes an asset.
Well, it could be depreciable, but if it overall produces more than it cost, then it's an asset. But the difference is, immediate gratification usually costs you wealth.
Yeah.
Long-term vision pays because you got to build momentum and let things compound and grow for you. I started saving at age 28, really. I started saving $200 a month.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's 20 days. That's $10 a day, basically $1 an hour. And I started there. Then 3 months later, I made it 300. Yeah. 3 months later, 500. 3 months later, 750. 3 months later, 1,000. And then every 3 months, I just increased it 10%. And then 2 years later, I'm double that. Then 4 years later, or 2 years later, I'm now doubled again. I went from 1,000 to 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 1,000, 16,000, 32,000, 64,000, $128,000. Some months, $256,000 a month.
Yeah.
And I grew my business. And all of a sudden, what I was imagining I would someday have in my whole life, I was knocking out in a year, more than that in a year, because I invested in myself. See, until you manage your money wisely, you don't get more money to manage. And until you value yourself, don't expect others to. And until you wisely put money into assets, with the moment you do, you don't attract things that depreciate and erode things. See, if you don't pay yourself and invest and put things into assets, you attract unexpected bills and consumables that wipe out. So you have to value yourself. You have to value wealth building. You have to value serving people. And you have to transcend the idea that it's good or bad. Because there's a lot of people around you that are trying to throw you off and be opportunists around you to take your money. So you have to care enough about serving humanity to be wealthy and care enough about yourself to value yourself.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. What does it mean to serve or value ourselves, or more specifically, to pay ourselves?
Well, if you're not paying yourself first and you're paying yourself last, unexpected bills will erode the potential for what you can earn and build in wealth. Because entropy takes over anything that's not negentropic and organized. Mm-hmm. So if you're not organized with your wealth and you don't have your house and financial house in order, see, if you don't know what your total assets are, you don't know what your total liabilities are, mm-hmm. you don't know what your total net worth is, you don't know what you want to live on as financial independent passively, you don't know what your average interest rate from all your knowledge of investing is, you don't know what the average inflation rate that will erode that. If you don't know what the total net worth you need to give you that passive income at that level of interest and inflation, if you don't know that and you don't have a strategy of getting it, you're living in a delusion you're going to be financially independent. And I stand in front of sometimes 10,000, I've been 28,000 people before speaking. And I've asked them, how many people want to be financially independent? Everybody puts their hands up. How many are? All the hands go down. And I said, the reason why 99% of people put their hands up and 1% do it is because of their values. And if they don't have the values for it, it ain't going to happen. You have to have a higher value on building assets than you do on immediate gratifying consumable purchases.
Let's talk more about these money beliefs. And you mentioned it earlier, but I want to dive right back into it. First off, the money belief, is money the root of all evil?
Well, anybody that would think that is actually deluded into thinking they're obviously some sort of religious construct that's basically making sure that it's more blessed to give to the church than actually receive, which is delusional. The only thing that's true is fair exchange. You know, if you go in narcissistically and try to get money from people and not serve them, you're out of business. If you go altruistically and sacrifice your profits, you're out of business. But you go in there with equity within yourself, not pride or shame, and equity between you and the person, and you try to serve them and you try to serve you and you put a fair exchange together, you got sustainable, repeatable business that'll grow wealth. So what happens is wealth is teaching you how to be true to yourself, not be exaggerating, not minimizing. It's trying to be true to yourself, and it's trying to put you on actually a spiritual path, not a pseudo-anthropomorphic religious dogma and institutionalism, but a true spiritual path where you're feeling fulfilled, serving people and being rewarded. That's one of the most fulfilling things, making a difference in people's lives and getting rewarded for it. That's life.
I absolutely love it. What would you say are some other money beliefs? And I love how you say money and spiritual path. I couldn't agree more. What are some other money beliefs that we have that are holding us back?
Well, I know a guy who came to my Breakthrough Experience program, which is a signature program I've done 1,069 times now. Almost, I do them every week almost. This guy came in and he was plateauing in his business at $40,000 a month. That was the gross business he could get. He couldn't get past, $500,000 a year basically. And he did. He came to the Breakthrough Experience and he had a major issue with his dad. He was enamoring his dad for his integrity and everything else. But his dad had a poverty kind of mentality. He had a low value in wealth building and a high value in intellect, schooling, service to the community, and spirituality and family. So he didn't have a wealthy father. He was just a good guy, that just middle class kind of thing. But because he was enamored with part of his dad, he thought, I can't do it. And my dad says that money's not the most important thing. What's important is family and doing good service and everything else. So he was subordinating to his dad, but having a desire to be wealthy and having an internal conflict. And so he was frustrated because if he gets ahead, then he feels guilty because his dad said, if you're getting rich quick, you're probably doing something, wrong, bad, evil, etc. So he had this internal conflict. So he came to the Breakthrough Experience, and we did this process on his dad and cleared the infatuation and the programs by changing the perceptions and the way he saw things. His business over the next 2 weeks went to $200,000 once his mind was clear of this box that he was in, this internal conflict, because he was free to get out there and serve people and receive. And in the process of doing it, he actually took a portion of his money and contribute to the community like his dad wanted. And his father actually came to him, surprisingly, and said, son, you're an inspiration to your father. What you've just done is amazing. And when he heard that, he cried, and he realized that he had been living in this box in his head that he had made, but because of what his dad said. But his father was actually envious and wishes he could have done that, but he was in a program that he never broke through. And so people have sometimes programs because they subordinate to people that aren't masters of wealth building, don't have a value on wealth building, and they subordinate to them, inject their values, try to live by them, and trap themselves living in conformity instead of enormity.
If we're listening today, how do we check in with ourselves and start to get clear whose value systems are running the show?
Anytime you hear yourself saying, I should, I'm supposed to, I got to, I have to, I must, I need to, you got an outside program, a super ego, as Freud used to call it, injected values from some authority out there. You need to trace where that's coming from and find out and ask, is that really the authority I want to live by? Because you may find out the authority you have is not somebody that matches your dreams. Then you need to go in through and do my value determination process on my website, drdemartini.com. Yep. It's a 13 questionnaire, takes 30 minutes of your time to narrow down what is really important to you, what's truly valuable, what your life demonstrates it's valuable, and then start prioritizing your life. Because every time you live by your highest priorities, the ABCs, you grow in self-worth, and you get more productive, and you get more inspired, and you're more called to action, and you're more creative and more expansive, and you're more service-oriented and solution-oriented. And when you do, you grow your wealth. So prioritizing your daily actions according to what you really value and listening to all those injected values of others. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, envy is ignorance and imitation is suicide. Don't live in other people's values and try to be. Einstein said the same thing. If you compare yourself to a cat when you're a fish and think, screw, I can't even climb a tree, what's wrong with me? Or if you're a cat expecting to swim, you're going to beat yourself up. And a lot of people compare themselves to others and beat themselves up and think there's something wrong with them, and there's nothing wrong with them. They just haven't identified what's really valuable to them and prioritize their life. We're not here to compare ourselves to others. We're here to compare our actions to our daily priorities and stick to priority and grow our self-worth. When we do, amazing things change in our life, and wealth building is the starting point of that.
Woohoo! I love it. I call that death by comparison. What happens when we envy and look towards other people and say, I need to be where you've got this boat, well, I've got that, and so forth and so on. However, let's switch gears. It's a similar topic. I want to talk about who do billionaires hang out with and why'd you end up moving to the Trump Tower?
Well, I had learned many times that the people you hang out with impact your life.
Yeah.
And I found out, I noticed it when I was a little bit younger, 20s to 30s, that when I saw wealthy people, they thought my services were cheap and inexpensive, and I was being too generous. And when I hung out with poor people, they thought I was greedy and too expensive and stingy. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Two people have two different views. One makes me feel like I want to expand. The other one makes me feel like I'm guilty and contract. If I listen to the world on the outside, who do I want to stand up with? And then I realized a real important thing. If I want to expand myself, if I hang out with the people that are expanded beyond even, and then serve the people that aren't expanded and help them expand, everybody wins. So I made a commitment to go and surround myself with the people that are the most powerful people on the planet. Yeah. I've met amazing people. I've met almost 4,000 people that do global things. And in the process of doing it, I found out that I asked myself, my wife, and I thought, where is the most powerful, most influential, most profitable, most inspired individuals we could find? And we were living in New York at the time, and Trump Tower became the place. So we decided to move into Trump Tower so we could position ourselves and interact with some of these people. Well, the first year we were in Trump Tower, we first rented. The first year we did it, we saw the impact it had by the people we met. Then we bought there, and we lived there. And we had a great spot. They were on the 62nd floor there, which is a good space.
Do you mind if I ask? Oh, sorry, don't want to interrupt there, but wondering what the cost, if you don't mind sharing, what's it cost to live there?
Well, that particular place we bought was only a couple $1 million, but it was worth it. I mean, it was worth it. When we first rented there, I think we paid, I don't know, $7,000 or $8,000 a month for the rentals. Yeah. But we went there and we bought this place for $2 million. Well worth the process. We had Steven Spielberg on our right. Yeah. We had the guy that owned Guess Jeans on the left. We had Kenny Rogers across the hall. Above us was, Bruce Willis and Sophia Loren. Right above that was Michael Jackson's wife the one that had the babies, and again Bruce Willis. And above that was the Donald. And below that, we had this lady that was a billionaire that was down in Florida. And so there was a really quality, interesting people that are doing movers and shakers. Even Hillary Clinton used to stay in Kenny Rogers' place. We'd hang out with Hillary and meet her. So the positioning was great. It was worth the effort. And that was great until 2001. And 2001, when 9/11 came, my wife was not allowed back in the building. She was there at the time, wasn't allowed back in the building. And in the process of doing it, come on, my girlfriend just got here. And anyway, my wife passed away back in 2004.
Sorry.
But what happened is then all of a sudden we end up deciding to move on to the ship called the World. And the process of doing that, there's even a higher. Come on, it's okay. No, it won't matter. You can walk by. My girlfriend's walking by in case you didn't do it.
Hi.
She can say hi. Anyway, so in the process of doing that, we decided to move on to the ship called the World. And that's a very magnificent place. There's some really amazing people that live on there, very fortunate people that do amazing things on the planet. And so in the process of doing that, that also escalated it. Because you hang around with people that expand and do amazing things. It forces you to kind of push yourself to go further. And so I can say that was one of the great moves in my life, those two steps in my life.
Beautiful. And I've got to ask for those that are listening, and please forgive me, why wasn't your wife allowed back in the building?
Well, in 9/11, they thought that Trump Tower might be another one that they were, targeting.
Yeah.
Because the trade center was a big thing, but then the 9/11 Trump Tower was an icon building, right? So they thought the Empire State Building, they exited. Everybody had to exit that. And our building, the same thing. Any of the major tall buildings that were icons had to be out. And so we weren't allowed to do it. So she couldn't go in the building and she couldn't get off the island. There was no roads were shut down. The tunnels were shut down. The bridges were shut down. So she got a private helicopter to come in and pick her up off the street and take her to Philadelphia so she could fly to we had another home in Australia at the time. She flew to Australia. And it's there that I decided to kind of as an anniversary present to buy the ship. So that's when we decided to buy the ship back in 2001, right after 9/11.
I love it. So let's tangent from there, and we're talking a lot. Now we're starting to shift and talk about our time and how we're using our time. So I want to know, what do billionaires do with their time, and why is productivity our enemy? Trading our time for money.
Well, if we're not leveraging our time, we're constricting ourselves. So I'll give you an example. I have a friend who is I've had that many hours with, named Bill Pollock.
Yeah.
And he's a lovely gentleman, and he created Drake International Corporation, which is an international business. He's a wealthy billionaire. And this man is very much loves working. He works 7 days a week. He's about nearly 90 now. He still cranks it. And he just loves what he does. He told me at a French restaurant in Sydney, Australia, we were having dinner one night, he said, in 1951, when I started my business, the last day I ever worked. Even though I put in 18-hour days, 7 days a week, I don't work because I really love what I'm doing. He's inspired by it. And he was very much, and he says, I'm interested in making sure that everybody in my company is inspired by their work and every customer is satisfied. And I want to make sure that I find everything that I can do for the clients, the customers, to help them grow their business. If I help them grow their business and bring in the quality people to do that, everybody wins. And that's the most fulfilling thing in life. And I get rewarded economically for that. So here's one example of that. I have other people that I've met that are wealthy people that they figure out how to do the things that they do best and they delegate the rest away. And they don't do it all themselves. They don't put the hours in like Bill did, but they're very efficient at doing what they do best. And that may be closing deals. That may be inspiring. That may be talking teamwork. I don't know, but each person has different ways in which they've achieved their greatness. And so the key is to making sure that they're doing something that they're inspired to do, that they love doing. Because money without meaning can lead to debauchery, but money with meaning leads to contribution to humanity. So you want to make sure you do something that's really valuable to you, that really serves people, that's really inspiring to people.
Well, that gets to what can you tell us about Ed Tellison?
Well, Ed Tellison is a guy that very few people seem to ever hear about or know about. But back in the 70s and in the early 80s, he was big. I was learning from Zig Ziglar at the time, yeah. And right before that is when I met Ed Tellison. He traveled the world. He lived in these in the high-rise penthouses of the finest hotels. And he traveled around the world, and he had 100 audio cassette tapes for $10 a piece. You buy for $1,000. And what happened was, I bought this. I stretched and bought $1,000 back when I was about 20.
Yeah.
And it was audio cassette tapes on every imaginable thing and how to be an entrepreneur. And he said to me, never live where you can't see the farthest horizons. Always live where you have nothing blocking your view. And then he also said things about entrepreneurship that I still use today. And I sort of modeled part of my life after this guy. I traveled around the world. I live in hotels. I live on the ship and travel. And I did basically what he did. And he lived in these fine hotels, and he taught people how to live an entrepreneurial life, whatever it is to them, their dreams. And he's a really amazing guy, and he had students all over the world, and he lived in many, many countries around the world. And so I basically structured that. I followed that.
Beautiful. So going back to time for a minute here, I was talking with Jessica, my wife. She's the producer of the show. And yesterday she felt she didn't get anything, quote, done, that she took time off. She went for a walk. She stepped back. We did have an interview. I believe we hired the most amazing person. But other than that, she didn't get anything, quote, done until we were talking to our editor in Hollywood last night. And because of all her time stepped back, she's like, wait a second. What's it take for us to make a pilot? What's it take for us to get people on board? And it turns out that her time that she stepped away is probably, my guess is 100% over time, going to lead to a show on Netflix or Amazon. How is she looking at time differently that those who have wealth do and those who don't have wealth don't?
Well, if she stepped out and she got a creative idea that was higher in value and more efficient and effective, there's many ways of getting the outcome. You can sometimes, my former wife, she used to meditate hours.
Yeah.
And sometimes then come up with one article, and then she'd make thousands of dollars off an article just by meditating. Different people have different ways of getting their most efficient, effective things done. And if some people step away and get that and come up with an innovative idea, and that leads to a great result, that's one approach. Some do it by diligence, like Bill Pollock. There's no one way to do that. But whatever it is that inspires that person, that gives them the most effective and efficient outcome, things that are prioritized to them that they want to create in a world that serves people, that's the path. But I can tell you there's a full spectrum of how people do that. There's no one thing that does it. It's a full spectrum. I know people that go and create I met a guy that he never built a business in his life, in the sense of he never managed one. But what he did is he was incredible at business planning.
Yeah.
And he saw opportunities. He built business plans. He inspired people with the business plans, sold the business plans. He would do a business plan and spend maybe 6 months on a business plan that was flawless.
Yeah.
He'd sell it for $2 to $5 million and start another business plan. And he'd sit and do business plans. And he'd travel, and it didn't matter where he went. And he'd travel the world doing business plans, looking for problems in the world to solve and put businesses to solve and solutions, and then sold them to people that were entrepreneurs that wanted to implement them. He never did a business in his life. He just ran the business plan. So there's people that do creative things. I know another guy that sat in his underwear and played guitar and looked and searched, Google search, for what people were looking for, and found out who were the greatest people to solve the problems, linked them up, got a 15% affiliate arrangement with it, and made $24 million in a year. So I've seen every imaginable thing across the spectrum. I can't say there's only one way of doing it, but I know that one thing is common to them, something that they're inspired to do, something that's prioritized for them in their path. I don't know what that is. Each person, I got to find out when I consult with them what that is for that individual.
And something that's aligned with their values.
That's it. That's what I mean by inspiring them. If it's not aligned with their values, they won't have the perseverance and persistence to actually do it.
Let's go from perseverance and persistence. And in your book, The Values Factor, you have a beautiful list of 23 things. I'm not going to ask you to repeat the whole list of key traits of billionaires. And I want to go over a few highlights, and maybe there's some that stick out for you. But the first one that I want to go over is the billionaires start simple, humble, and small.
Many people, I had the opportunity to work in London with a gentleman who was the son of one of the wealthiest billionaires in London.
Yeah.
And he was a spoiled little brat. You heard the statement, rags to riches to rags, in just 3 generations. It's true. This guy is what a good example. So his father basically never gave him accountability, and he never had any responsibilities. And he was a little brat. His father kind of disowned him and gave him some money, get out of here. And he came to me for a consult because he was angry because his father didn't give him the whole company. And he came to me and he said, you know, what do I do to get my father's company? He's being mean to me. He's not giving me what I want. And I said, if you're smart, this is what you do. You give him all your money back. You go to your company, his company. You ask your dad if I can go to the factory at the bottom level and work your way all the way through every single job position. Prove that you have earned it. Prove the respect from all the people in the company. Get your crap together and focus on actually serving people instead of your own narcissistic pursuits and your debauchery, and get on to doing something that makes a difference. And your father will give you the company because you earned it. But he's never going to give it to you the way you're doing it, because I wouldn't do it. I'd kick you out of the house like he did. You're all you're doing is buying your friends. You're spending money on drugs. You're living in a hedonistic life. I said, that's delusional. So money without meaning can lead to that. But money with service and meaning is very powerful. And so I've seen people that do that, and they come from too much wealth. But people that come from poverty, you know, I've met some people that came from more of a poverty position, and they had a desire and they had a value and a void driving them to go out and do a great service. There were three things that I found in the Book of Wealth by Hubert L. Bancroft about wealthy people. They felt by divine providence and human sovereignty that they wanted to serve vast numbers of people as a calling to do that. They wanted to raise the standards of humanity, and they had transcended the moralities of money, which wasn't good or evil. It wasn't, it wasn't their infatuation. It wasn't their resentment. They just wanted to serve people, and they just let the money accumulate and buy assets with it because they could serve more people with it. It exemplified what was possible to other people. So I'm a firm believer that having a void like that is actually to a person's advantage, wealth building. And coming from richness, sometimes the parents spoil kids and they don't have a drive anymore, and that's why it goes down, not up.
I've heard Warren Buffett gave a very small amount of money to his kids to invest, and then the rest they had to, at least for a while, I don't know about the long-term answer, make on their own.
Well, that's true. I do that with my kids too. Same thing. They got to work. They don't work, they don't get anything. Yeah. So that's life. That's the game of the name of the game.
So I've got to ask, what ended up happening with your maybe one-time client?
I wish I could tell you that was only a one-time client. I never saw the guy. He was irate with me. He says, I paid money for this to give me this kind of advice. I wanted you to go talk to my dad and give me the company. I said, you're living in a delusion, guy. And he was. He was a spoiled little brat. If you support some people, they'll become dependents. If you challenge people, they'll become independents. Entrepreneurs come from the challenge, not from the support.
So that lands us to another one, that billionaires are innovative visionaries who thrive on criticism and are even inspired by it. So if this guy was going to take off, what you said might have lit a fire on him instead.
I don't know. I wish I could give you the feedback. I haven't investigated him to do it. But I can say this, that when you have a boy and he loves his video games and he's sitting at home doing his video games, he loves them. He's inspired to do them. Yeah. And he's going to conquer that game. Because when you do something you love doing, you want to excel. What happens the second you conquer that game, you're going to want to go get a more advanced game. Yeah. And you're going to try to manipulate your parents to get that game. And the second you do, you're going to master that. You're going to then want to go to the advanced game further. So when you're doing something that's high in your values, you pursue challenges that inspire you. But when you're doing something that's low in your values, you want to avoid challenges that despire you. One creates eustress, one creates distress. So entrepreneurs that become wealthy are people that pursue challenges in humanity and in the world that inspire them, that they want to solve. And that's why they end up doing something. I've asked people in many countries I've been speaking, how many of you have used Microsoft Windows before? Every hand goes up. Yeah. I said, now you know why he's a billionaire. He created something that served everybody that's in this room. If you go out and care enough about humanity to find out what serves people, no reason why you can't do that. But you got to go out and do something that fills people's needs. Money comes from filling people's needs. It doesn't come from any other source, really, unless you're doing trading and then you're living zero-sum games off other people that are producing. And if you had too many people that way and people no producing, there's no economy. So you have to care enough about humanity. I was speaking at a church one time, and I said, if you're poor, it's because you don't care about humanity. And the whole place went quiet. And I said, if you're poor, you're not serving, because if you're caring about people, you're going to want to fill their needs. And that's where money comes from. Money's just an exchange, a transaction for people filling their needs.
So if we're not making money, one of the things we get to stand back and say, what can I do? Like that gentleman making business plans, or the one who is getting the 15% by looking on Google for what people want, and say, what do people want that I can offer them?
That's it. That's it right there. What is it that the world is looking for, and how can I directly or indirectly provide a service to that? and find out if you can find something that's meaningful and inspiring to you, you'll tap dance to work, as Warren says, to go do it. But if you don't, then you better find somebody who loves doing it. Otherwise, the service standard won't be competitive. And you got to be able to do it effectively and efficiently. And the people that are effective and efficient are the people that do things that are high on their values.
Awesome. And then the people who are making the money, what are they doing with leveraged debt?
Well, they're using leveraged debt for their advantage. People go out and foolishly buy things that depreciate in value with debt at high interest rates. I'm in South Africa. The interest rates here over 20%. Imagine buying things at 20% for a credit card to go buy something like a dress or something. Unless that dress goes and produces something or gets you a result or gets you the guy that you're looking for or whatever it is your purpose is in it, that's a depreciable thing that you're probably going to wear a few times on a high interest rate. You want to use debt wisely by buying things that give you more return than the cost of the debt. Mm-hmm. And if you can produce more than the cost of the debt, then you're using other people's money to help you build wealth. That's smart. But just buying things that depreciate in value and go down in value and pay high prices for it works against you as far as your independence. And it puts you in your lifestyle that raises it and your savings and investments that go down. So that's backwards.
Thank you. Speaking of leveraging, what about working with other people, about collaboration?
Well, that has value as long as the person you do is truly going to expedite that progress as far as serving people. Sometimes people minimize themselves, think other people are exaggerated. They over-exaggerate them, want to partner with them and get into business and then end up having calamities. Or they try to merge companies thinking that they exaggerate the value of another company and they merge it and undermine cultural development. The key is to make sure that you really know the person, make sure that you actually are collaborating with them and make sure that what they're providing is really what you're looking for and build it, because then you have a mastermind effect, a factorial effect.
Yeah.
There's a thing, the factorial effect is very powerful. 1 factorial is 1, 2 factorial is 2, 3 factorial is 3 times 2 times 1. 4 factorial is 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. 5 is 5 times 4 3 times. So it goes 1, 2, 6, 24, 120, and it goes up from there. It goes to 600 or whatever. And so every time you add another person, you're actually magnifying that, and you can do more. But you have to make sure that there's a cohesive thing that allows them to niche everybody else's weakness with everybody else's strength to make a whole, to go out and serve people more efficiently.
Beautiful. On that note, well, a few quick wrap-up questions. First off, top 3 habits of billionaires.
Well, the people that I've met, some on the ship and other places, and people I've consulted with, and et cetera, without a doubt, the people I know, there's a lovely man that lives on the ship, an absolutely lovely man. He was interviewed recently by Forbes, and very beautiful man. He is constantly, he's developed over 400 patents, 4,000 patents, 4,000 patents.
Yeah.
So he's constantly learning. He's very engaged and interactive. He's very open-minded and hearted, but he's constantly looking for opportunities to serve people. And he's done that. And he loves also being philanthropic. So he's a humanitarian. They've opened up 5 colleges in his name. And he's done amazing things. So they're constantly looking at what they can do to be a contribution to the planet. That's one.
Yeah.
They're constantly looking at how they can do it more effective and efficient than somebody else. Bill Gates has an affirmation that according to what I've read, I haven't talked to him recently, but he basically says, he asks every day, what is it that I can do that can serve the greatest number of people with the resources I have today? That's a great question. The quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions we ask every day.
Yeah.
And the other is that they don't sit there and get wealth building for the sake of doing nothing. They do wealth building because they have a cause. There are 6 things I found common to wealthy people, that they build a business that serves vast numbers of people.
Yeah.
They manage the business where it's effectively and efficiently maximizing profits. They save a portion of their profits and escalate that and save ever progressive portions of it. They invest it in ever greater degrees of leverage. Then they go out and accumulate the fortune, and then they create a financial cause that leaves a legacy and gives back in the direction they want, that serves vast numbers of people also. Those 6 things are found common in very wealthy people. They're wise things that we can all follow.
So I think you just gave us 8 habits. I love it. So from there, what advice would you give parents to help their kids today, like your parents helped you?
Give them accountabilities, responsibilities. The Rockefellers, when they asked them about charity, they said there are 4 things that you must never do when you're dealing with charity.
Yeah.
Never rob people of dignity, accountability, responsibility, or productivity.
Yeah.
Make sure that So give kids responsibility, make them hold them accountable for doing things, and don't give them something for nothing, because you'll get them entitled, they'll get soft, they won't be in. A lot of the kids today have been too soft, and what they're doing, they're not prepared, and they're living with anxiety disorders and taking drugs because all of a sudden they're having to be accountable as they get older. Give them accountabilities, give them jobs to work, let them work. Work is not something bad. Work is something that's fulfilling. It's very inspiring to people. So let them do things around the house. Give them accountabilities, responsibilities and stuff, not just make it too easy on them because you have money.
It's got me thinking about myself real briefly. I started working not about full-time, paper route at 10, golf course full-time in the summers at 12, full-time in school by the time I was 16. But I actually had to work through a lot of a poverty or lack consciousness. They have, I don't. And seeing myself trading dollars for hours. How do we help kids with that?
Well, if you're doing a job that is by the hour only, you can't leverage, because you can't scale it up as easy. So no one's going to end up being wealthy unless they learn to delegate and have people doing things in their specialties that are needed to do the service that you desire. So, I say, if you go and do something that is truly meaningful, that truly inspires you and serves others, and you do it in a fair exchange that's sustainable with equity, you'll have money to be able to pay for people to delegate other things, to liberate you and to start leveraging. And you eventually start delegating the very bottom levels, and you work your way up until you duplicate yourself, and then you can leverage even further. When you do, you can go and do amazing things. But there's different types of business that are easier to leverage than others, and it depends on what you love doing. And you may leverage in different formats based on the areas and types of services and that you provide people. So you have to look at how you can leverage and ask yourself, how do I leverage that? Beautiful. I use it by doing different things, by doing radio, television, newspapers, magazines, online programs. There's all kinds of ways of generating income that way.
And on that note, and speaking about what you love to do, what brings you the greatest happiness, or what you call the woohoo factor?
Well, the most fulfilling thing that I get to do is what I do. Travel the world, teach, inspire people, and hear the stories and watch the transformations in people's lives. I mean, I just got through finishing tonight a 7-day program, 14 hours a day on leadership and mastery. And it was amazing. Tonight was a great close. And it was just an amazing week. And I already know, I've been doing that program for nearly 30 years. I already know what's going to happen in some of those people's lives, because I've gotten testimonials and letters from people around the world. So it's inspiring to do it. And the thank yous that came at the end are worth it. I mean, I already know what's happening in their life. So I think the inspiration of watching people's lives change and knowing that what you gave them is solid, and if they apply it, it's going to make a difference, and it's going to ripple effect into other people. And the stories you get, man, it doesn't get better than that. So it's a great opportunity to do what you love every day.
I couldn't agree more. On that note, where can people go to find your beautiful book, all of your books, and to find out more?
Well, they can go to drdemartini.com, DREMARTINI.com, drdemartini.com. If you just look my name, DeMartini, you're going to find it. And go on there, and there's just a plethora of information there. There's products there. There's CDs, DVDs, books. There's radio, television, newspapers, magazines by the hundreds or thousands. There's online YouTube systems. It's an educational website in addition to my commercial website. And I just encourage people to do it and do the value determination process there. It'd be very helpful, I promise you. Very helpful.
If you didn't catch DrDeMartini.com, come on over to InspireNationShow.com. We'll get you over to DrDeMartini.com. Any last words of wisdom you want to share today, John? And this has been phenomenal. I think it's been wealth building. It's been value aligning. And I think it's actually going to get people really putting a mirror on themselves and questioning, what am I doing?
Well, everybody, as I said, has a set of priorities. If you live yourself by high priorities, you grow your self-worth and eventually net worth. If you live by lower priorities, you decay it. Everything that goes on in your physiology, everything that goes on in your psychology, everything that goes on in your sociology, everything that goes on in your theology are all feedback mechanisms to try to get you the most authentic person you can be. And you want to be, by being authentic, you want to give yourself permission to shine, not shrink, not live in people's shadows, but on their shoulders, and go do something extraordinary on planet Earth and give yourself permission to do that. If you do that, nothing has to stop you from doing an incremental growth. And don't try to do it overnight. Piggy banks become biggie banks. Little actions make big dreams. Every day do something, every step in the direction of your dreams, and you'll build momentum, and eventually that momentum's unstoppable. And you can't stop somebody who perseveres towards something that truly serves people efficiently and effectively. So every day, keep doing that on a daily basis, whatever it may be. If it's raising a family, if it's running a business, if it's going to build wealth, if it's doing sports, do what you're really inspired to do. And I believe that if you ask yourself, the 7 questions, what is it I would absolutely love to do? How do I get handsomely paid to do it? What are the 7 action steps I can do today to make it happen? What obstacles might I run into and how do I solve in advance? What worked and what didn't work today? How do I do it more effectively and efficiently tomorrow? And how did whatever happen today help me get closer to my dream? You ask those 7 questions every day, your life changes.
Woohoo! So on that note, for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying be well, have fun, get the values factor, and begin creating your own inspired, wealth-filled life today and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, John.
Thank you. Lovely interview. Great fun.
I just love talking with Dr. John Demartini. Hope you did too. To check out his next video, click here, subscribe below.